The letter arrived on a Tuesday, on the 14th floor of a building that had no name on its directory because everyone who needed to find it already knew exactly where to look. Dominic had placed it on the desk without ceremony, the way he placed everything that arrived through irregular channels, which in this building meant most things. A plain white envelope, slightly crumpled at one corner, the return address a strip mall postal code 3 miles south. A child's handwriting in green crayon across the front. The recipient line read, "Only Santa," in letters that pressed hard enough to leave grooves in the paper beneath. Andrew had looked at it for a long moment before picking it up. He read it once, set it down, and read it a second time. The letter was 6 sentences long. 5 of them were a 6-year-old's specific and reasonable requests. A new backpack, colored pencils, warm boots in a size 7, and one stuffed rabbit named after a cartoon character whose name was spelled inventively wrong. The 6th sentence was not a request. It read, in the same pressed green crayon, "Santa, I don't need anything else if you can just make my mommy smile again because she used to, and now she doesn't, and I think she forgot how." He set the letter down very carefully. Dominic, who had remained near the door, noticed that his employer did not speak for nearly a full minute. Now go back a little. Back to the strip mall on Carver Avenue, back to the first week of December, when the cold came early, and the space heater behind the bakery counter had been running continuously for 12 days without managing to warm the room past 61 degrees. Marisol had worked at Rosales Bakery for 4 years, which was 2 years longer than her marriage, and about 3 years longer than the marriage had deserved. The job paid $800 a month, which had once been a supplement and was now the whole of it. She worked the counters 6 days a week, opening at 5:30 in the morning, and she had grown good at the work in the quiet, self-sufficient way of a person who has no one to hand the difficult parts to. She could frost a tray of conchas in 11 minutes. She knew every regular customer by their usual order and their approximate mood. She knew that the space heater's thermostat was broken and that the owner, Mrs. Rosales, had been meaning to replace it since October. She was 2 months behind on rent. $2,200, a number she had memorized the way she had memorized Lena's pediatric appointment schedule, and the expiration date on her bus pass. It sat in her chest like a stone with specific dimensions. Lena was 6 years old and had her mother's dark eyes and her father's total absence of doubt in the goodness of the world, which Marisol considered either a mercy or a time bomb, depending on the morning. The letter had been Lena's idea entirely. Marisol had provided the envelope and the crayon, and had watched her daughter kneel on the kitchen floor to write, her tongue pressed to the corner of her mouth in concentration. She had not read it. Lena had sealed it herself with a strip of tape pressed down with the flat of her small palm. And then she had asked to mail it from the blue collection box outside the bakery, because she said it was closer to the sky there and letters went faster. The collection box shared a postal routing code with the building on the corner, a 12-story converted commercial property whose 14th floor tenant received its mail through a private arrangement with the building's management company. A number transposition somewhere in the routing sent Lena's letter north instead of to the post office's holiday collection bin. These things happened. The postal system was not infallible. Marisol did not know any of this. She was, that Tuesday morning, managing the breakfast rush with 2 trays of pan dulce and a jammed credit card reader, and the space heater was making its particular high-frequency whine that meant it was working too hard, and Derek had just come through the door. She had not seen him in 2 months, which had been long enough to almost stop bracing for it. He looked the same as he always did, polished in a specific way that required a great deal of attention to appear effortless, and he moved through the small bakery the way he moved through most spaces, as if the room had been arranged for his arrival. He did not order anything. He came to the counter and looked at her for a moment, the way a person looks at something they have discarded and are now reassessing. Not with regret, but with the particular pleasure of confirming that they were right to leave it behind. "You look tired," he said, more than usual. Marisol handed change to the woman at the register without breaking her count. "What do you need, Derek?" "Nothing from here." He looked around the bakery with the expression of a man conducting a quiet appraisal. "Just wanted to check in. Heard you were having trouble with the rent." She had not told him that, which meant Mrs. Rosales had mentioned it to someone who had mentioned it to someone, or Derek had simply guessed and was watching her face to see if he was right. He was, and he saw that he was, and something in his expression settled with satisfaction. "I'm fine," she said. "You don't look fine. You look like you've let yourself go, honestly." He said it the way someone says something they have been holding for a while and are relieved to finally set down. "I told you a long time ago that job was going nowhere, but you wanted to be the martyr." He paused. "How's Lena?" "She's good. She needs stability, that's all I'm saying." Marisol had been in this conversation before. She knew its architecture, knew exactly where each door led and what was behind it, and she had learned not to open any of them. She kept her hands steady on the counter and her voice at a register that communicated neither anger nor invitation. "I'm working," she said. "You should go." He left, and the bell above the door made its small sound, and the woman who had been waiting for her change said quietly, "Good for you." And Marisol nodded once and went back to work. She did not let herself feel it until the lunch hour, when the bakery emptied out and she sat in the back with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, and the knowledge that $2,200 existed in the world, and none of it was hers. Andrew came in on Thursday. Dominic had handled the preliminary work, which in this context meant confirming via the postmark and a brief inquiry to the counter staff at the bakery's neighboring deli that the strip mall address on the envelope corresponded to Rosales Bakery on Carver Avenue. It had taken less than an afternoon. Andrew had looked at that information for a while, and then he had put on his coat. He went in the mid-morning, between the breakfast rush and the lunch crowd, when the bakery was quiet enough that his entering registered. He was not a man who went unnoticed in rooms. It was not a quality he cultivated. It was simply a quality he had, something in the stillness with which he occupied space, the way the air seemed to organize itself around him. He wore a charcoal coat over a white shirt, no tie, and he came to the counter and looked at the menu board with the patience of someone who had time to actually read it. Marisol came out from the back with a tray of afternoon pastries and saw a man she did not recognize standing at the counter. She registered. Tall, unhurried, a quality of containment about him that she associated more with people who were waiting for something than with people who were afraid of something. His hands were quiet at his sides. "What can I get you?" she said. "Coffee, black, and whatever you'd recommend from that tray." She set a guava pastry on a plate and poured the coffee and slid both across the counter. He put a folded 20 on the laminate and said to keep it. And she said the coffee was $2 and the pastry was $1.50, and he said he was aware of that. She looked at the 20 for a moment. The register had a cup for tips. She put the change in the cup, and he watched this with a neutral expression that she could not read. He sat at the window table with his coffee and did not look at his phone. He looked at the street. Marisol watched him for a moment between customers. That particular sideways reading she had developed over years of working a counter where she had to make fast assessments of who was fine and who was going to be a problem. He did not read as a problem. He read as something she did not have a category for yet. He was on his second coffee when Derek came back. She had not expected him so soon. Derek came in with the particular energy of someone who has continued a conversation in their head for 2 days and has arrived to deliver the conclusion. He was wearing the same jacket he'd worn on Tuesday, which meant he had been thinking about this and had not quite gotten around to changing. "You think about what I said?" he asked, coming to the counter. "I did," Marisol said. "I thought it was none of your business." "The rent situation is bad, Marisol. I know what bad looks like. And that apartment, with Lena, it's not sustainable." He lowered his voice, but not by very much. "She needs more than you can give her right now. You know that." She kept her hands on the counter and kept her voice level. "What Lena needs is for you to leave." Derek's expression shifted in the way she recognized, the shift from casual contempt to something harder underneath it. "You always were stubborn. I used to think it was strength. It's not, it's just, I don't know. It's a kind of stupidity, honestly. The martyr thing. The long-suffering thing." He glanced around the bakery. "This is it, Marisol. This is what you chose. $3.50 an hour and a broken heater. She earns a wage." The voice came from the window table. Not loud, not particularly pointed, stated with the same even quality with which a person would give a weather report. "And you have been in this building twice this week to say something unkind to her. So you're going to leave now." Derek turned. He looked at Andrew with the assessing expression of a man recalibrating who is in a room with him. Andrew had not moved from his chair. He was holding his coffee cup, his posture completely relaxed. And he was looking at Derek with the quality of attention you would give a minor obstacle you had already decided how to remove. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" Derek asked. Andrew did not answer the question. He set his coffee cup down on its saucer with a small, precise sound and looked at Derek and waited. Something in that silence was specific enough that it communicated without words. Dominic was visible through the front window, standing beside a black sedan at the curb, and 2 other men were visible behind him, and none of them were looking at the bakery with particular urgency, which somehow made it worse. Derek left. If you are watching this and you have ever stood in a room where someone finally said aloud what you had been silently absorbing for months, you understand the particular unwinding that happens in the chest afterward. Drop a comment below. Share this with someone who needed it this week, and stay with the story. Marisol looked at the window table. Andrew looked back at her. "Sorry about that," she said, because she did not know what else to say. "You don't have anything to apologize for." He picked up his coat from the back of the chair. "Is he going to be a problem?" "He's always been a problem," she said. "I manage." "I know you do." He paused at the counter. "My name is Andrew. I have something that belongs to you, or to your daughter. I'd like to return it." He set a business card on the counter. The card had a phone number and nothing else. "When you're ready." She called 3 days later, because it took her 3 days to stop telling herself she wasn't going to call. Dominic answered the first time, introduced himself with a courtesy that was so precise it read almost as irony, and told her that Mr. Reyes would like to meet with her at her convenience. She agreed to a Saturday, when Mrs. Rosales covered the counter. They sent the sedan. The building's lobby had marble floors and a concierge who addressed her by name without being introduced, which she filed away in the same drawer as the men outside the bakery window. The elevator took her to the 14th floor, and Dominic met her at the doors and walked her to a room that was more library than office. High-ceilinged and winter quiet, with floor-to-ceiling windows running along one wall and the city laid out below in a gray December afternoon. Andrew was at the window when she came in. He turned, and there was a moment of the same neutral, reading attention as at the bakery counter. And then he crossed the room and shook her hand and gestured toward the chairs by the fireplace. There was a fire going. She realized, only when she sat down and felt her shoulders drop a full inch, how long it had been since she had been properly warm. He told her, directly and without preamble, that a letter addressed to Santa had arrived at this building via misdirected postal routing, and that he had read it before understanding what it was, and that he had traced the postmark to the Carver Avenue bakery and confirmed the match through the counterstaff at the neighboring deli. Marisol listened to this and did not say anything for a moment. "You traced a child Santa letter," she said. "I wanted to return it." "You could have put it back in a mailbox." "I could have," he agreed. "I thought I'd bring it in person." She looked at him. He looked back at her, and something in his expression had shifted from the flat, procedural quality of the explanation into something quieter, more careful. "Can I ask what was in it?" she said. "She sealed it herself and I never read it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he took the letter from the inside pocket of his jacket, unfolded it, and placed it on the table between them without handing it to her. The way you set something fragile down, rather than pass it across open air. She leaned forward and read it. All 6 sentences. She read the 6th one twice. She did not cry, but it was a near thing, and it was close enough that she had to press her lips together and look at the window for a moment before she looked back. "She's worried about you," Andrew said. "I know. She's not wrong to be." Marisol looked at him. There was no pity in his face, which was why she did not stand up. Pity she was finished with. What was in his face was something more like recognition, and it was specific enough that she felt the weight of it. "The line about the smiling," he said quietly. "I have a photograph on this desk that I have not been able to look at directly for 3 years. I understood what she meant." He did not say more than that, and she did not ask, and the fire made its sound, and the city was a long gray spread below the windows. What followed was a month that rearranged itself around her in ways she kept having to consciously resist. A building maintenance crew appeared at the bakery on a Monday and replaced the space heater without being asked. Through what Mrs. Rosales described as a routine building order from the new property management company, Marisol looked at the new heater, looked at the invoice pinned to the wall, and thought about a 14th floor office and a black sedan. An envelope appeared in her mailbox containing a cashier's check for $2,200 with a note in handwriting she did not recognize. Outstanding balance. No terms. She stood in the lobby of her building, holding it for a long time. She thought about returning it. She thought about the stone in her chest with its specific dimensions. She deposited the check, and that night she called Andrew and told him she had deposited it, and she wanted to know what it was for. "It's not a condition," he said. "I didn't ask if it was." "I know. You were going to say you don't accept help from people you don't owe, and that you're not sure what you owe me." She was quiet. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Lena wrote a letter. I read it. That's all." She thought about the photograph on his desk that he could not look at directly. "Come for dinner," she said. "With Lena. So she knows the letter got somewhere." He came on a Wednesday. Lena, who had been skeptical about most adults since her father's departure, studied him from across the table with a 6-year-old's unencumbered directness and eventually asked if he knew Santa personally. Andrew said he had met him once, at a conference, and that he was shorter than expected, but organized. Lena found this satisfying. He came back the following Wednesday, and the one after that, and on the 3rd visit, He brought colored pencils in a tin that was clearly not from a drugstore. And Lena said they were the ones with gold and silver, and she had wanted exactly these. And Marisol stood in the kitchen doorway, watching her daughter press the silver one to paper, and felt something loosen in her chest that had been knotted there for longer than she could date precisely. She was putting Lena to bed on a Friday, nearly 3 weeks after their first meeting in the 14th floor office, when Andrew was in the kitchen and she had come out to find him refilling the kettle without being asked. He knew where the mugs were. He had put her cardigan from the back of the chair over his arm because the kitchen window was drafty, and she always forgot the draft. She took the cardigan from him. He did not let go of it immediately, which meant for a moment they were both holding it, she said. "You're careful with me." He said, "Yes," she said. "Is that going to stop?" He looked at her, and in the quiet of her small kitchen with the kettle building toward its sound, he said, "Only if you want it to." She did not want it to. The evening that followed was quiet and slow and warm, and the tenderness of it was specific to the kind of man who has spent a long time being very careful about where he allows himself to be unguarded. She ran her thumb along a scar on his left hand that she had noticed at the bakery counter on the first day, and he let her, and she did not ask about it. And he said softly, "You're the only person in 4 years who hasn't either asked or looked away." And she understood this was the closest he was going to come to naming what the photograph had cost him, and it was enough. 3 days later, Victor Holst made his move. She did not know who he was when she first heard the name. She learned it from Dominic, who appeared at the bakery on a Tuesday morning before opening with 2 men she had not seen before, and told her, with the same calibrated courtesy he applied to everything, that there had been a development and that she and Lena needed to come with him. She learned from Dominic in the car that Holst ran a syndicate operating out of the Port District, that he had been watching Andrew's movements for weeks, and that when he identified a pattern in those movements, specifically a consistent route to a strip mall bakery on Carver Avenue followed by a consistent route to a specific residential address, he had read this pattern as an avenue. Lena had been at school. Holst's associate had pulled up outside the school on Tuesday morning in a gray car and had spoken to the woman at the front desk about an early pickup. The front desk woman had called Marisol's number. Marisol had been in the car with Dominic. She answered the call, and her voice did not break, because she was her mother's daughter, and her mother had taught her that the most useful thing in a crisis was to move rather than stop. She said, "Don't release her to anyone. I'm coming in 10 minutes." And then she looked at Dominic and told him to drive faster. Lena was standing outside the principal's office when they arrived, holding her backpack by one strap and wearing the expression she wore when she felt she had been underestimated. The gray car was gone. Dominic got Lena into the sedan, and the front desk woman asked what was happening, and Marisol said a miscommunication, nothing to worry about, and thanked her. In the car, Lena leaned against her mother's arm and said, "That man outside had a tie clip shaped like a fish." She had cataloged him completely without appearing to register him. 6 years old. Marisol looked at Dominic. Dominic said quietly, "A fish-shaped tie clip." He took out his phone. Then she remembered Andrew's phone, the secondary handset Dominic had pressed into her palm the previous Thursday, with instructions she had absorbed and filed and told herself she would not need. She reached into the inside pocket of her coat. The phone was there. She turned it over, found the single pre-programmed contact, and typed the 6-character location code Dominic had told her. The school's cross streets. She sent it. She had not frozen. She had not waited. She had moved with the specific competence of a woman who has been managing the unmanageable alone for so long that action is her body's first response to fear. And she had done the one thing that gave Andrew the only information he needed to find them. The 4 minutes before he called back were the longest 4 minutes of the month. What happened to Victor Holst did not happen in a room she was in. She was at the 14th floor apartment by then, the one Andrew kept available but did not advertise, with Lena asleep on a couch under a blanket and Dominic's men at both stairwell exits. And she was drinking tea she had made from the kitchen she had come to know. And outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city was dark and wet, with December rain. Andrew called at 11:17 at night. He said, "It's done." He said, "Lena is safe." He said, "I'm 20 minutes out." She said, "I sent the code." "I know," he said. "You found them before I did." Victor Holst left the city that night in the company of 2 men whose names she never learned, and whose employment she understood, without needing it, explained. He did not return. His associate, the one with the fish-shaped tie clip, accompanied him. The matter of their business interests in the Port District was resolved through channels that left no documents in any file she would ever see. And this was precisely the nature of Andrew's authority. Not loud, not theatrical, simply final. Derek's entanglement surfaced in the same 48-hour window. He owed money to a third party she had never heard of. A private lending arrangement he had entered 18 months before their divorce. And that third party had a working relationship with someone in Andrew's organization. And the arithmetic of that relationship made Derek's ability to cause further difficulties vanish quietly and completely. He was not hurt. He was simply made to understand, through channels both procedural and unambiguous, that he had already exhausted whatever standing he'd thought he had. Marisol was behind the counter on a Saturday morning, 9 days before Christmas, when Derek came into the bakery for the last time. He came in with 2 men she recognized as the kind of men who attend to details on behalf of someone else. And he stood at the counter with an expression she had not seen on him before, which was the expression of a man who has learned that the story he was telling about himself was being told inside a larger story he had not read. He was there to clear up an account, one of the men said, a final matter. Marisol kept her hands on the counter and did not ask what account. Then Andrew came through the door. He came in without urgency, in the charcoal coat, and he came to the counter and stood beside Marisol. And she felt the shift in the room the way you feel a change in barometric pressure, in the chest, before you can name it. The 2 men with Derek looked at Andrew and did what most people did when they understood who they were looking at, which was to recalibrate every assumption they had walked in with. Derek looked at Andrew, and then he looked at Marisol, and he said, "You're with him." Andrew said, "She is." 2 words, completely even, containing everything. Derek's expression moved through several stages in a short period. The casual contempt that had been his default setting for years went through something like disbelief, and then something more like vertigo. The particular vertigo of a man discovering that the person he has been measuring himself against was not keeping the same score. "I meant what I said," Derek said, because he was constitutionally unable not to have the last word. "About her, about the way she looks, about the apartment, about all of it." "I know what you said." Andrew looked at him with the same flat, patient quality he had brought to the bakery window table 2.5 weeks ago. "Every word of it was wrong. And you said it in front of people who will remember you said it. You can go." The 2 men with Derek went first. Derek followed, and the bell above the door made its small sound. And then he was on the other side of the glass, on the pavement. And then he was smaller, and then he was gone. Mrs. Rosales, who had been in the back and had found increasingly slow reasons to remain near the doorway, came out and looked at Andrew, and then at Marisol, and said in Spanish, "I'm going to make more coffee," which in Mrs. Rosales' vocabulary was the highest available expression of approval. Marisol looked at the door Derek had used, and at the pavement beyond it, and at the blue collection box visible at the edge of the frame, where Lena had knelt to mail her letter 3 weeks ago. Something in her chest had a different weight now. Not lighter, exactly. More settled. The weight of something that had been held in suspension, finally finding its correct place. Andrew was watching her face. She was right, he said. About the smiling. Marisol looked at him. And she was, she realized. And she did not try to stop it. He told her, the following week, that he had purchased the lease on the building's retail units through a property management company, and that Mrs. Rosales had been informed that her rent would be fixed for the next 5 years. He told her this in the same matter-of-fact register he used for most practical information, the way a person reports something they have handled rather than something they have done for effect. Marisol sat with this information for a while. "You bought the building," she said. "The retail lease. Because of the bakery." He was quiet for a moment. "Because of a lot of things." She thought about the cashier's check, the space heater, the colored pencils, the 14-floor apartment with the stocked refrigerator and the soft clothes in her exact size that had been there before she arrived, which meant someone had found out her size and ordered them, which was either the most efficiently caring thing she had ever encountered or the most quietly audacious. And she had decided, somewhere around the second Wednesday dinner, that it was both. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "No," he agreed. "You're not." The week before Christmas, Lena wrote a second letter. She wrote it at the kitchen table in the 14th floor apartment, with the gold and silver-colored pencils, while Andrew sat across from her reading something and Marisol made coffee in the kitchen. Lena did not seal this one. She left it open on the table and pushed it toward Andrew. He looked at her. She said, "You can read it." He read it. Marisol watched from the doorway. The letter was 5 sentences. The first 4 were a list, slightly revised from the previous version. The backpack was already covered. The boots were already on Lena's feet. The rabbit had arrived via a gift that had materialized on the apartment sofa with no explicit explanation, and which Lena had named something that rhymed with Andrew. The 5th sentence read, in the green crayon still, because it was Lena's letter color. "Santa, I think you sent Andrew by mistake, but that's okay because he's good at smiling too now." Andrew set the letter down on the table with both hands. His jaw was set in a way Marisol recognized. He looked at Lena for a moment, and then he looked at Marisol. And something in his expression was entirely unguarded, in a way she had only seen twice before. Lena seemed satisfied and went back to her drawing. Christmas Eve arrived the way December evenings do in cities, cold and lit and carrying the particular feeling of a year about to become something else. The 14th floor apartment had, at Lena's specific direction, a tree in the living room that was not large but was well considered, and it had lights, and Lena had placed a drawing of a rabbit near the base of it, which she described as a tree topper for the floor. They had eaten dinner, the 3 of them, and Dominic had come for an hour with wine and stayed for dessert, and had told Lena with complete seriousness that the rabbit's placement was structurally sound. And Lena had nodded as if this confirmed her judgment. Later, after Lena was asleep on the couch with the actual stuffed rabbit under her chin, Marisol and Andrew stood on the balcony. The city was all lights below them, 14 stories of December air between them and the street. And the cold was the clean kind that comes when the wind has stopped. She had his coat over her shoulders, the charcoal one, which was too large and warm. He stood beside her, with his hands on the railing. The street below had a late-night quiet, the particular quiet of a city that has paused for something. He said, "She's going to ask me about the conference in the spring, with Santa." Marisol said, "I'll leave that to you." He was quiet for a moment. Then he took one hand off the railing and held it out, not reaching for her, just open. She put her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, steady and unhurried. And she thought about a letter written in green crayon on a kitchen floor, sealed with a strip of tape. Mailed from a box closer to the sky for faster delivery. Something did get there. The city held its light below them. The street carried its late quiet. And inside the apartment, on the couch by the tree, Lena slept with her arms around the rabbit and her second letter on the table and every window tight against the cold.